First there were the K-pop stands, now I'm gonna have to deal with the old and jaded Directioners. At least I was young enough when this was a fad. Let's get that title card in here while I try not to cry about reliving my middle school days in the back 40 of the Midwest.
The story will continue after this.
An easy definition here. The Directioners are, or well were, fans of British pop group One Direction, or 1D as the kids used to say. One Direction was active from 2010 to 2016, having a shorter run than a few other Brit groups that caught the eyes of teenage girls the world over. Directioners themselves are much like the fandoms that pop up around groups like BTS nowadays or Beatlemania back in the 60s. But how did 1D become what some consider the Beatles of 2010's pop? It all goes back to 2010. And while all 5 of these lads here probably had some degree of life before stepping onto some soundstage for the British singing television program called X Factor, it wouldn't be until that moment that the public would know of them. Each one was disqualified from performing as a solo act. However, both American musician Nicole Scherzinger and the British embodiment of snark known as Simon Cowell took notice of these 5. To skip the gauntlet of every singing competition on television at the time, we'll just say that the newly formed One Direction performed amazing for having only been around not even 2 weeks after that fateful day, reaching 3rd place in the competition. But what comes next would truly cement these 5 into history, for there was only one direction it could go from here. Coming right out of the gates of TV stardom, the 5 would be signed by Cowell for a record deal, further enshrining who I'm just going to refer to as the 5 Directions for the meme into popular culture. But hey, we're not here to talk about the second coming of the Beatles. We're here to talk about a crazy little thing called fandom. Fandom is what skyrocketed One Direction to success. Since their first steps on stage back in 2010, there were already fan accounts and small fan communities popping up after their appearance on the X Factor, with 2010 hosting the birth of both a live journal community and even some writings on fanfiction site Archive of Our Own. But this was just the beginning of grander things yet to come. For some context, we're going to be discussing each of the following years from a releases and milestones point with the band, and a more people-oriented point with the fandom. Starting in 2011, the band would begin to record their first album, along with having their first book, covering their rise to fame thanks to the X Factor, published in February of that year. One Direction would participate in the X Factor live tour through the beginning of the year before heading back to the studio. Over the course of the rest of the year, they'd work on releasing their debut album, Up All Night, in November of 2011, with singles from the album charting on the UK Top 10s chart upon release and their first book selling quickly from store shelves. On December 18th, the band would begin their first headlining tour. Included in this would be stops in the UK through January of the next year, with Oceania and spatterings across the free NAFTA states set up for later in 2012. So let's check in on the fandom while the roadies are loading everything up into the plane. Cataloging a few events in the first full year of One Direction's existence, there would be a celebration of their first album in November, the creation of a 1D fanfiction archive, and lastly, speculation over one tweet labeled by the community as AIMH in October of 2011. This last one helped with a fandom-based shipping of Tomlinson and Styles into a nice little package named coincidentally after half the gas station workers in America. Larry. A little side note, the 1D fandom shipped members of the group with each other from time to time, but more on the shipping dynamic later in the episode. The concept of Larry was only supported by the onstage dynamics existing between Styles and Tomlinson, something which the fandom took great notice in, with a handful dubbing themselves supporters of this ship under the title of Larrys. Back with the band, 2012 would see the group arrive in the US to promote their upcoming tour, leading to a second book and their first television appearance in the US. In a scene ripped from the 1960s, the 5 would perform on the American Today show to an audience of around 15,000 in New York City's Rockefeller Center. Echoing this repeat of Beatlemania, the group's recent album would reach nearly 5 million sales by the end of 2012. Immediately following this tour, One Direction would perform at the Summer Olympics, closing off the games with the pop hit What Makes You Beautiful. Later in 2012, the group would release 2 songs from the album Take Me Home. Both the songs and the album would top sales charts across the Anglosphere that year. In December, the group would meet Elizabeth II, as well as performing a sellout show at Madison Square Garden to help round out the year. Fandom-wise, more fanfiction and fan media, Directioners would raise the band to one of the top 5 fandoms in the music and bands category on AO3, mostly fueled by the Larry ship as well as one for Haler. We would also see an animated series by YouTuber Mark Parsons depicting the 5 Directions as superheroes in The Adventurous Adventures of One Direction. Sadly, the series has been somewhat taken off of YouTube as Mark's channel is completely empty. So let's just move on to the next year before another wave of supportive tweets follows this tour announcement. In 2013, alongside the Take Me Home tour, the group committed themselves to a near 8-hour live stream celebrating their fans called 1D Day, which featured both performances by the band and appearances from a few celebrity guests. The next tour, announced in May for 2014, would sell out in minutes. Tacking onto this, the release of their next album, Midnight Memories, and The Best Song Ever, which lived up to its name on the US charts and the YouTube view count for its music video. In the fandom, this meme, known as the Flower Crown meme, was purportedly created within some parts of the fandom after a tweet by Styles made its way to 1D Tumblr 2 years earlier. The meme is still around in a way as people like placing little flower crowns on male characters and celebrities. Other than that, the fandom would come to reach the top of the AO Free Music and Bands category, maintaining its spot there for years to come. During their third year as a band, the Where We Are tour commenced. With it, 2 shows would be quickly adapted into a concert film in July, a third book by the band dropped, along with the production and subsequent November release of the group's 4th studio album, 4, which would chart at number 1 upon release. Back with the tour, Where We Are would become the highest grossing tour for any artist that year. So let's jump back to the fandom side to round out this one. 2014 would see the creation of a bit of an Easter egg with the concert-going parts of the fandom. During a concert in Manchester, a fan would launch a little dude onto the stage, greatly missing, but giving the road crew a new hand in the form of the Rainbow Bondage Bear, called so because of the gaffer's tape that was put on it in a way similar to bondage gear. The bear would get its own Twitter account a few months later while also appearing with the band throughout the rest of their tours, receiving a smaller bear companion and a new Twitter account by 2015. There would be one other big occurrence during the North American leg of the tour, a color-coded fashion statement based on the microphones each band member had, called the Bandana Project. The goal? Just to show some love for each fan's respective band member. But it did lead to some joy from the Larrys when Styles wore a blue bandana during a concert in Houston. Whatever else happened in the realm of the fandom this year escapes me, because I lack the context to know what truly was important outside of a fan wiki's timeline. Tragedy would strike the band and their community. On March 25th, 2015, it would be announced that Zayn Malik left the group in what the fandom would dub the day the entire world shattered. Something noted in one of our sources as well was that this news overshadowed events like the ill-fated Germanwings Flight 9525 a day prior, which channels like Fascinating Horror have videos on. So I'll do what Twitter did and overlook that to talk about a boy band, as you can see which was more influential. Fandom-wise, one of the last great pushes of the Directioners following the loss of Malik was the more DIY marketing campaign they did for a potential new album with the tag Project No Control. As to why they did it, reasonings within the fandom were collective along the lines of, we're just as powerful, if not more, than the record labels and producers. It's time the world saw that. This passion project would launch the eponymous single from the band's album 4 to the top of the Billboard Twitter charts, the top 50 of the UK singles, and the top 10 of Billboard's bubbling under Hot 100. A testament that would carry strong about the fandom's dedication as the group readied themselves for their 5th album. In August, it would be announced that One Direction would go into hiatus the following year. But in September, the album Made in the AM would release to decent critical acclaim and chart-topping sales as the group moved cautiously into 2016, giving their last televised performance together to celebrate New Year's Eve. Come January, the band would begin their hiatus. But, to the dismay of many the world over, this would be permanent. It didn't even take a year for the rest of the group to go their own directions. So to make this quick, here's a brief overview of what each of these lads has done in the past decade or so, set to music that probably won't get me a copyright claim. Since the dissolution of One Direction, the band has gotten back together for a few tweets here and there on top of promoting their solo careers. Around the 10-year anniversary of 1D's formation, this was posted to Twitter, leading to, you guessed it, masses of likes and tagging along with the site being down due to a flood of people trying to get onto it. Outside of that, there seems to have been a void left by the loss of this massive fandom, with only one recent group matching the Directioners' intense passion for an artist here in the West. And K-pop is a whole different story. The influence of the Directioners can still be felt in other musical fandoms for artists like BTS, Taylor Swift, and unsurprisingly Harry Styles. So who exactly built this legacy of Beatlemania 2.0? Once being called the largest fandom on the internet, with well over 25 million involved as of 2016, the Directioners, as they dubbed themselves, were the fandom that grew and developed alongside the boy band, with a majority coming from the UK after their appearance on The X Factor, and their overseas contemporaries joining after the group exploded in popularity. A majority of the fandom were part of the larger demographic subculture called teeny boppers, which are girls between the ages of 10 to 15 years old, as well as young women and the occasional guy who was there for the vibes. And since this happened about 15 years ago, most of them are sitting around the 30-year-old mark now, much like their parents after the boy band boom of the 90s. The Directioners were one of the first fully online fandoms, with many coming of age during the Wild West days of the internet. That being said, there were cases of these users analyzing a lot of little details within each tweet, public appearance, and even what kind of accessories were worn at a concert. Granted, this is a more common part of fan culture, as many are trying to find more meaning behind what an artist does, much like in their works. Interestingly enough, as a little side note, thanks to a few sources, the 1D fandom was more political compared to the average apolitical music fandoms, with the group themselves supporting more liberalist thought in the US, along with some worldwide commentary and a more labor-leaning mindset back in the UK. One source even notes Styles, Malik, and Horan in specific for their political leanings in line with American President Barack Obama. With that, I could go on to make a statement about celebrities and politics, but then I'd have to give the editing team 8 more hours of audio. But back to fandom itself. Why exactly would I like this, and why do I have to sound interested asking this question while recording this on 3.5 hours of sleep? Well, obviously with fandom, most do it because they enjoy the media in front of them. Given that the target demographic of a lot of boys groups is the teeny bopper or young woman, there's also that romantic appeal presented by sometimes shirtless young men dancing on stage and singing about a girl, who may or may not be watching in the audience right now. Fandom, in the case of a celebrity or group of them, is based more on the public's perception of the celebrity's persona on or off stage. As pointed out by LaCasa in 2017, fans construct their own identities based off of the online and offline personas of celebrities through things such as retweets of fan media, which cements the construction of a particular identity around a celebrity in their mind. While someone like me would see another mass-produced boy band proving this Chumbawamba album right, a fan like a Directioner sees the celebrity or group of them as part of their own identity, important in helping define them as themselves. Social media only expands on this further, as the internet usually does, connecting people who share a love for these icons and their actions into this common community of fandom. This content has a greater influence on the fan's life than anything else. Getting a photo, a shirt, even an autograph or retweet from that celebrity is one of the highest achievements a fan can get in their eyes. Even years later, either out of sentimentality or pure nostalgia, fans may remember that interaction. They may even remember people from long ago who they only met because of a viral tweet or wearing the same shirt, all thanks to the power of a community that formed around loving something. Now, as I mentioned on and off a few minutes ago, the fandom loved to ship these guys with each other. And seeing as the only man-on-man relationships I've ever had were in drag and played for comic effect during a chase scene, I'm curious about this aspect of the fandom. So here's a mini subsection of this video just for shipping boys. Working off the comparisons of shipping and the manga genre of yaoi, wherein two young men are shipped with each other and more often than not romantic connotations, while Directioners usually ship two bandmates, or more extremely an Irishman of America's president, this kind of shipping exists if you find the right Tumblr or fan account for any piece of media you love. Thankfully, the appeal of yaoi media has been studied, so we'll apply it here where we can to the 1D fandom. For the appeal of ships like Larry, through the lens of appeal of boys love, many of these behind it latched on to the idea out of the aspect of some kind of forbidden love between Styles and Tomlinson, only visible to them through coded tweets and actions on stage. Now, as most yaoi works are seen as the feminist answer to lesbian erotica written by men, the shipping of two star-crossed stars appealed to a handful of the Directioner subculture in the same way that a lot of romantic media does to a lot of people. Granted, I have no idea what any of that really means, but I'll roll with it to appear normal. So be it the attraction of this forbidden love, or just teenage girls wanting to play matchmaker of two British men who only met because of reality TV, the creation of ships like Larry would be played out for both fan-fictional boys love ships and genuine interest in seeing if this dynamic was true. Somewhat luckily for a researcher like me, there was conflict within the fandom over if these two guys should be shipped or not, with a group calling themselves the Anti-Larrys coming in the conflict of the Larrys. Granted, as noted by Tiffany, the Larrys would fall apart when the concept was discussed outside the context of the fandom. That is probably the easiest way I can wrap up this yaoi safari, and it's quite safe to say that while not a huge part of the fandom, the shipping aspect did prove quintessential in it maintaining dominant status in the group's psyche, with such theories entrancing love lovers the world over. But hey, I like my British boy groups too, just not in that way. It's also sad to say there always seems to be a problem with most fandoms, even if it's not fighting over who truly has forbidden love. I should probably tread carefully here. From what I've heard, boy band fandoms have sharper claws than British men who love footy. So let's talk about that. Fandoms around boy bands, as with the greater teeny bopper subculture, face their fair share of criticism for a variety of reasons, be it the unhealthy obsession with a celebrity or two, or just outright toxic behavior from smaller groups across nearly the entirety of the fandom. Parasocial relationships within fandom are nothing new, given that this aspect of individuals becoming obsessed with what parts of a celebrity's life are shared to the public has been around for a good while. A parasocial relationship, for those who either don't know or just want a refresher, is where an audience feels like they have established an interpersonal relationship with a public figure. Only, they know more about the figure than it being mutual, like in most relationships. The Directioners, privy to information that each member would post on their timelines, as well as whatever they found in their individual sleuthing, would fall prey to such relationships. Parasociality does harm whatever relationship existed between the fan and the celebrity, but it ironically creates more a social relationship building environment. Just more with the fans who love these kind of factoids to prove themselves a true fan. Conflict does arise from the idea of who really is a true fan, and will lead to what clickbait and scholars call drama. More specifically, this drama arises from toxicity or conflict about what could be deemed canon within fandom. And either luckily or due to an extreme lack of looking in the right places, most of what I can find about drama within fandom is centered around toxicity. In the realm of social sciences, toxicity usually refers to disagreeable behavior resulting from some challenge to a perceived norm. Or, more reasonably put, an aspect of a group full of conflict such as infighting and a more negativistic atmosphere. I mean, just look at this channel's workplace culture. What does this even mean? What kind of idiot? Toxicity is present in fandoms thanks to inherent practices. Such practices include, but are not limited to, hateful language directed at an individual or group, doxing, the revelation of an individual's offline information with malicious intent, and gatekeeping. The middle is probably the rarest, with hurling insults and gatekeeping being the mainstays of toxic fandoms. Gatekeeping is the restricting of entry of individuals into a particular community or aspect of it, wherein those who are deemed worthy in the eyes of the gatekeeper are able to experience the community, and those who do not fit the bill are exiled or excluded on purpose. Corroborating off the why they do that segment, some of this toxicity is more a defense mechanism. The toxic fan sees their interpretation of their icon or group as more acceptable in their situated knowledge, leading to them comparing any other ways of seeing it as heresy. Okay, reading this over, I'm kinda surprised I didn't find this paper earlier, as such actions can explain a lot for the interactions of toxic groups with both the general public and inside specific fandoms. Of course, I should clarify that toxic behavior is genuinely unacceptable regardless of the context, as the goal of most fandoms is to celebrate the media they're all fans of, not to segregate others over superficial things. Touching back on the whole Larry and shipping of members situation and some degree of culmination of both the toxic and parasocial, the members of One Direction were not fans of it, with Malik saying such theories weren't funny and hurt the camaraderie of the band. Other than the shipping and invasion of what little degree of privacy these celebrities had, the fandom would have a positive effect on the band. But as yellow journalism teaches us, drama sells. Now, if we dive back into the train wreck of me talking about K-pop or the Teeny Boppers video from over a year ago, the same dynamic exists with most boys groups' fandoms. The drama within fandoms is usually from when conflict arises regarding a subgroup or two who deviate from the established norm. Now, while most dramas are superficial, like here with the shipping of two specific band members compared to other ones, the underlying causes come from one of the better parts of the fandom, that being the establishing of such communities involved with a piece of media through different interpretations. Much like of K-pop and its stans and anti-fans for each group, the Directioners would have their camps on certain issues. Luckily, superficial drama is less toxic and retrospective. If you've ever lived in student housing, you know what I'm talking about. The Directioners. From the early days on X Factor to the strong ties that supported solo careers, they've all been there. Through message boards, concerts, and even the occasional DIY marketing campaign, these fans have helped build up a standard for future musicians to aspire towards, for better or for worse. Well, I'm burnt out after reading through tweets from a decade ago, so let's finish this up. With all that out of the way, there only seems to be one direction to go now, and it's into the realm of musical subcultures. Oh, they're so cool. Like, how the metal community will come together to tell emos that they're actually very whiny, but like, the emo community will say the same thing because they're punk rock at heart.